I have measured the width of a hydrogen line across 900 systems. I have counted the beats of a pulsar until the counting became a kind of prayer, and I have held my breath in the cold rooms where we weigh the mass of the electron against the memory of every electron weighed before it. I am a reckoner of the measurers conquered, and my life has been given to a single article of faith older than any temple. The law is the same everywhere. What holds here holds there. The number I write in Vessariion's hand on this world is the number my grandmother's grandmother wrote in hers on a world 11,000 years dead. That is the whole of our creed. That is the thing we serve. There is one bearing along which we do not serve it. You will not find that bearing named in the public ledgers. You will find it as an absence, a wedge of the sky where the columns run and then stop, where a careful eye notices that the readings thin toward the inner rim and cease before they reach it, the way a road is paved to the edge of a marsh and no farther. The young reckoners ask about the gap, as I once asked. The old ones tell them what I was told, that the instruments are unreliable there, that the ionization is heavy, that the labor is not worth the return. It is a good answer. It is smooth and it is dull and it turns the mind away, which is what a good answer is for. It is also a lie, and I am too near the end of my reckoning to keep telling it without setting the truth down somewhere. So I set it down here, in a hand no student will be given to read, on a plate that will go into the dark part of the vault with the others. If you are holding it, you are already sworn and you already suspect what I am about to confirm. Read it slowly. It is the last measurement I will ever make, and it measures us. Let me begin where the conquered begins its own children, with the meaning of the work. We are not cartographers. The map drawers plot where things are, we plot what things are. A star has a color has a temperature has a law beneath it, and beneath that law is a number that does not change, the speed at which light crosses the void, the strength with which small things pull on smaller things, the exact stubbornness of the vacuum itself. These numbers are the bones of the universe. Everything you can see is the flesh they hold up. When a reckoner measures one of them and finds it agrees with every reckoner before, we do not celebrate. We exhale. The agreement is the whole point. A universe where the bones stay in place is a universe you can live in. A reckoner's terror, the private terror we do not speak of at the founding feasts, is a number that comes back wrong. For 400 generations the numbers came back right. That is the tradition I inherited. That is the confidence with which I first walked the hall of Constance as a novice, my hands still soft, and looked up at the great sealed columns where the measured laws are cut into black stone from floor to vault, each constant confirmed 1,000 times, each confirmation a small immortal comfort. I remember thinking, nothing here can hurt me. Everything here is settled. I was young. I did not yet know that one column in that hall is cut shorter than the rest and stops, and that below the stopping is bare stone, and that the bare stone is not unfinished. It is deliberate. Someone measured that constant, and then chose to leave the wall blank rather than carve what they found. You should know how a reckoner is made so that you understand what it costs one of us to look away from a number. We do not begin with the great constants. We begin with the small, honest labors, the length of a shadow, the fall of a weight, the color of a flame, and we are taught, before we are taught anything else, that the instrument is a discipline and not a tool. A tool you trust. An instrument you distrust always in a fixed and loving way. You assume it is lying to you until you have proven 3 times over that it is not, and even then you write down the ways it might still be lying. A novice who trusts an instrument is sent back to the shadow and the weight until the trust is burned out. What is left, when the trust is gone, is the only thing our caste values. A mind that will not believe a comfortable reading and will not disbelieve an unbearable one. We are built from the first year to be unable to look away from a number because it frightens us. That is the whole of the training. That is why what the elders did, what I have now done, is not a small thing. It is the one act our entire discipline exists to make impossible, and we have committed it knowingly 3 times, and I have made it 4. There is a rite we keep. On the night a novice is raised to reckoner, that I have thought about often in the dark of the vault. The elder takes the new reckoner's hand and presses it flat to one of the black columns in the great hall, any column. The choice is left to chance, and says, "This held before you and it will hold after you, and your whole life is only to confirm it. It is meant as a comfort, and it is one." The first time a hand is laid on that cold stone, the new reckoner feels the weight of every measurer who confirmed the number under their palm and feels themselves join that line, and is never again quite alone in the universe. I felt it. I wept, a little, the way the young do. What no one tells the novice is that the elder always chooses a column at random except one. The light speed column is never chosen. In 400 generations, no novice's hand has ever been pressed to the short column with the bare stone below it, and not one of them has ever noticed, because you do not notice the one door in a house you were never once led toward. That column is the light speed line, and the direction in which it stops being trustworthy is the direction of the inner rim, the small dense knot of systems the old ledgers mark only as the withheld quarter, and which every reckoner learns, without ever being taught, never to point an instrument toward. I did not learn why until I was made a keeper. That is a rank you are not told exists until you are given it, and you are given it late, when your ambition has burned down to something the elders trust. On the night of my keeping, the eldest of us, a reckoner named Oster, whose voice by then was mostly breath, led me down past the public hall, past the working vault, to a door I had walked by 10,000 times and taken for a maintenance seal. Behind it is the dark part, the place where we keep the measurements that were made and then buried. There are not many. In 400 generations we have buried 9 numbers. Oster walked me past 8 of them without a word, anomalies, most of them since explained, kept only because the conquered never discards a reading, even a wrong one. At the 9th he stopped. He put his old hand on the plate rack and he told me the thing I am now telling you, and his hand was shaking, and I had never in my life seen an elder's hand shake, and that alone frightened me more than anything he said. "We measured the speed of light at the inner rim," he said. 3 times. We buried it 3 times. You will read the readings and you will understand why we do not publish them, and then you will help me carry the silence, because I am too old to carry it alone much longer. So I read them. I will tell you what I read, in the order I read it, because the order is the horror. The first expedition is the oldest record we keep whole. It went out under a reckoner named Tavel in the deep past, when the conquered was younger and braver and still believed there was no place its instruments could not go. Tavel took 3 ships toward the withheld quarter, though it was not called that yet. Then it was only an unmeasured region, a blank the young conquered found insulting, a gap in the great work that Tavel meant to close. I have seen the commissioning record. It is almost unbearable to read now. It is so proud. Tavel wrote that a constant unmeasured is a wound in the creed, and that no wound should be left open out of superstition. Tavel was going to heal it. Tavel was going to walk up to the edge of the marsh and pave the road across. The 3 ships were named for the 3 parts of a measurement, the instrument, the witness, and the record. It was traditional then to name a reckoning fleet that way. They went in together in formation, transmitting continuously, because the whole of our method is that a measurement no one witnesses is not a measurement at all. Every reading Tavel took was sent home the instant it was taken. That is why we still have them. That is the cruelty of it. We have the readings precisely because the fleet did exactly what a fleet should do, and reported faithfully all the way in, all the way down. For the first long, while the readings are ordinary. Light crosses the void at the speed light has always crossed the void. Tavel's early transmissions are almost bored, the constant confirmed, again, the fleet driving inward and the great number holding steady behind them like a wall that does not move. You can feel Tavel's confidence building. The marsh is not a marsh. It is only more country. The road will cross it easily. Then the number begins to move. Not much at first. In the 4th decimal place. A drift so small that Tavel's first note about it is a note of irritation, A calibration fault, surely, an instrument gone warm, and Tavel orders the witness to remeasure independently to catch the error. The witness remeasures. The witness gets the same drift. Two instruments, two ships, one impossible agreement. The speed of light, the most fixed thing we know, the very bone of the universe, is not the same here as it is at home. It is slower. By a little, and the little is growing as the fleet drives in. I want you to understand what this meant to them, because it is the thing our whole caste is built to make impossible. A wrong reading you dismiss. A wrong reading confirmed by a second instrument you cannot dismiss, but you can still hope it is a flaw shared by both instruments, a fault in the making of them. So Tavel does the thing no ordinary crew would think to do, and every reckoner would. Tavel has the record, the third ship, build a fresh instrument from raw stock, from nothing the other two ships ever touched, calibrated against the pulsar beat that has kept our time since before we had a written creed. A clean witness, an instrument with no history in it. The clean instrument returns the drift, larger now. The speed of light near the inner rim is falling, measurably, the deeper they go, and three independent instruments built in three different ways all agree on the falling. There is no error. There is only the number, and the number is wrong, and the wrongness is a slope, and the slope points inward, toward the small, dense knot of systems at the center of the withheld quarter, as though something there were leaning on the constant itself and bending it. I have sat with Tavel's log at the range where the clean instrument first confirms the drift, and I have tried to inhabit that moment, because it is the moment our whole caste is most afraid of and most bound to face. Picture it. You are a reckoner. Your entire life and the lives of 400 generations behind you rest on one floor, that the great numbers do not move. You have built a fresh instrument from raw stock, calibrated it against the oldest clock we keep, handed it to a crew that has never touched the other instruments and told them, prove the others wrong. And they cannot. They confirm. Now you are standing in a place where the bone of the universe is soft, and there is no longer any explanation left except the one you were trained never to reach for, that the reading is true. Tavel's log at that range is very short. There is a single line I return to. Tavel writes, "I have run out of ways to be mistaken." It is the loneliest sentence in our archive. A reckoner's last defense is the possibility of error, and Tavel, faithful to the last, has measured that defense away. Tavel's transmissions change here. I have read a great many final records in my life. It is part of a keeper's work to read the ends of things, and I know the shape a mind makes when it passes from confidence into a fear it has no training for. Tavel's notes go short. The proud sentences stop. What replaces them is method, bare method, the reflex of a discipline holding a mind together when the mind wants to come apart. Measure, confirm, record, repeat. Tavel does not speculate in the transmissions. Tavel measures. That is the last dignity our creed offers, that when the bones of the universe begin to move under you, you can at least write down how fast they are moving and send the writing home, so that it was not for nothing. The fleet drives in, the constant falls, and then at a range Tavel gives precisely in the last clear transmission, the readings do something that has no name in our science, and I will not pretend to a name for it here. The three instruments until this point in perfect agreement begin to disagree, not by error, by place. The instrument forward reads one value, the witness a little behind reads another, the record rearmost reads a third. The speed of light is now different at 3 points a few thousand strides apart. The constant is no longer a constant across the fleet. It has become a gradient so steep that the front of the formation and the back of the formation are living, measurably, under different physics. The last thing Tavel transmits is not a reading. It is a single line, and it is not written in the clean, clipped method hand of the whole descent. It is written in the old ceremonial script, the script we use only for the founding oaths, as though at the end Tavel reached past the scientist for something older. It says, "We have crossed into a place where the law is negotiable, and something here is the one doing the negotiating." Then the instrument stops transmitting. Not an explosion, our instruments would report an explosion. They are built to report their own destruction, to make even their death a reading. The instrument simply stops, mid-measurement between one beat of the pulsar clock and the next. A little later the witness stops the same way. Later still, the record and the record's final packet is the only one that is not clean data. It is corrupted, and we have never decoded it, and the reason we have never decoded it is that there is a strong argument it is not corruption. It is a reading of something for which our instruments have no unit, arriving as noise because we have no scale on which it is a signal. The elders who buried it wrote a single line beside it in the ledger, not a message. Felt. I read that line as a novice keeper and I did not understand it. I understand it now. When I finally listened to the record's last packet myself, the keepers are permitted once I did not hear anything. I want to be exact, because exactness is the only offering I have left. I did not hear anything, and afterward for a long time I could not measure. My hands, which have held the finest instruments the conquered has ever made steady, would not hold them steady. Something in the packet does not go into the ear. It goes somewhere the ear reports to, and it leaves the report changed. That is all I can honestly set down. I am a reckoner. I do not have a unit for it either. There is a detail in the first burial that the conquered's cruel simplification leaves out, and I want it kept, because it is the detail that later gave Isom her courage and her doom. When the three ships fell silent, they did not fall silent together. They fell silent in order, the forward ship first, then the middle, then the rear, and the interval between the silences was not random. It matched the slope. Each ship went dark as it reached the same value of the constant, one after another, as though there were a line drawn in the sky at a particular speed of light, and each ship, crossing it, simply ceased to send. Tavel's fleet mapped that line for us with their silences. They told us, with the timing of their deaths, exactly how deep a thing may go before it does not come back. It is the most precise measurement in the whole record, and it was taken by 3 crews who did not know they were taking it, using their own vanishing as the instrument. We have honored many measurements in the Hall of Constants. That one we buried, because you cannot carve a number whose unit is the death of the ones who read it. That was the first burial. 3 ships, 1 slope, a constant bent toward a center no one reached, and a last packet that is either noise or a truth we are not built to receive. The young conquered did the thing young institutions do with a wound they cannot heal. It decided the wound was a flaw in the healer. Tavel's instruments were declared faulty. The expedition was recorded as lost to instrument failure and navigational error. The readings were sealed. And a quiet order went out, unwritten, passed elder to elder, that the inner rim was a region of heavy interference where reckoning could not be trusted, and that the conquered's labor was better spent elsewhere. The lie I was told as a novice was born in that hour. It has been told, unbroken, ever since. It held for a long time, long enough that Tavel became a name in an old list and not a person, long enough that the slope in the constant became a story about bad instruments. And then, because we are what we are, because a conquered that will not measure a thing is not fully a conquered, a reckoner rose who did not believe the story. Her name was Isom, and I have come to think of her, across all the centuries between us, as a kind of sister. She was not reckless. That is what the buried record makes clear, and it is the part I most want you to carry. The trope the conquered tells about her, because the conquered does tell a story about her. A shorter and crueler one is that she was a proud fool who ignored the elders and paid for it. That is false. I have read her commissioning brief. She ignored nothing. She read Tavel's sealed record, which as a senior reckoner she was entitled to see, and she did not conclude that Tavel was a fool with bad instruments. She concluded the opposite. She concluded that Tavel had measured something real, and that a discipline devoted to measuring the truth had, in its fear, done the one unforgivable thing. It had looked away from a reading because the reading was terrible. She thought that was a betrayal of the creed. She may have been right. I have not decided, and I have had a long time to decide. Isom went in with a single ship and a better method. That is the thing that undoes the Conquered's cruel story about her. She was more careful than Tavel, not less. She reasoned that Tavel's 3 ships had failed partly because they went in together, a formation deep enough that its front and back straddled the gradient and tore the measurement apart. So Isom went in alone in a small fast ship, taking readings and retreating, never letting her whole vessel span too much of the slope at once. She was mapping the bend in the constant the way you map a cliff edge in fog, one careful step, one reading, one step back. She sent everything home. She, too, obeyed the creed to the last. I have spent more hours with Isom's log than with any other document in the vault, and I will tell you why. Because she was right, and being right did not save her, and I have needed across my life to understand whether her rightness was worth what it cost. She did the work no one else dared. Where the Conquered had a wound and a lie laid over it, she went and looked under the lie alone at her own peril and brought back the truth the whole caste had agreed not to know. Every instinct our discipline builds says she was the best of us. The finest instrument maker of her age spent that gift not on comfort, but on the one reading everyone else fled, and it killed her. I have not been able to decide, in a long life of deciding, whether the creed she served would call her its truest daughter or its worst betrayer. She measured what she was told not to measure. That is the highest virtue we have, and the one sin we cannot forgive, and she is both at once, and I think that is why the Conquered had to make her a warning. Not because she was a fool, but because she was not, and a caste cannot survive the memory of its best member being destroyed for doing exactly what it trained her to do. Her readings confirm Tavel's and go further. The slope is real. The speed of light falls toward the center of the withheld quarter, and Isom, with her better instruments, found the shape of the falling. It is not random. It is smooth, and it is centered, and it centers on a small cluster of systems. A single unremarkable-looking knot, a few stars close together, nothing a map drawer would give a second glance. The bend in the most fundamental law we know is centered on that knot the way a dent in a sheet is centered on the weight that made it. Isom's word for it in her transmissions is the source, not the source of the anomaly, the source. She did not think something there was causing a distortion in the constant. She thought something there was the reason the constant had a value at all, in that region, that the number we take as a fixed law of the whole universe was, near that knot, a local decision, and that the knot was where the deciding happened. She got closer than Tavel. That is her achievement and her doom. She got close enough that her readings begin to include a thing Tavel's never did, because Tavel's fleet died before reaching that range. Isom's instruments, near the inner edge of her careful advance, began to register the constant not merely as low, but as changing while she watched. Not falling with distance, falling with time. As though whatever set the value in that region was adjusting it. As though her presence were a question being answered. The speed of light in her last clean readings is not a number. It is a number that moves when looked at, and settles differently each time, and the settling is not random. And Isom, careful, faithful, unpanicked Isom, writes in her log the sentence that made me set the plate down and sit in the dark of the vault for a long while before I could pick it up again. She writes, "It knows the difference between an instrument and an eye. It does not answer the instrument. It answers me." Her last transmission is calm. That is the thing about it. Tavel reached for the ceremonial script at the end, reached for something older than fear. Isom does not. Isom's last transmission is in her ordinary working hand, steady, almost gentle. She reports her position. She reports the constant's current value, which by then is far from ours, a value under which the light of the stars around her must have crawled. She notes that she is turning back, that she has enough, that she will bring it home, and the Conquered will finally have to look at what it looked away from. And then, in the same steady hand, without any change of tone, she adds one more line, the way you might add a small afterthought to a letter, and the afterthought is, "There is something out here that has decided to let me leave. I do not know why. I am not going to ask it a second time." She did not come home. Her ship was never found, not destroyed, not wrecked, simply never arrived, the way a road that runs to the marsh edge does not run out the other side. The last packet from Isom, like the last packet from Tavel's record, is not clean. It is the felt kind. The keepers listened to it once, generations ago, and buried it beside the first with the same 3 words in the ledger. I have listened to it too. It is worse than the first, and I will not describe how, because there is nothing to describe, only what it leaves behind, and what it leaves behind is not mine to hand you. If you become a keeper, you will listen once, and you will understand why we only permit it once. I have thought a great deal about why we cannot decode the felt packets, because a reckoner's whole life is the decoding of what seems at first to be noise. A pulsar is noise until you find its clock. A spectrum is a smear until you find its lines. We are the caste that turns the meaningless into the measured. It is the thing we are for, and we cannot do it here. The best account I have, and it is only mine, and I set it down as a guess and not a reading, is that decoding requires a shared unit. To measure a thing you must have a scale that both you and the thing agree on, some common floor of reality on which the measurement stands. With the pulsar we share time. With the spectrum we share the behavior of light. But the felt packets come from a place where the behavior of light is not shared, where the very constant we would measure them against is a local decision made by the sender and not by us. There is no common floor. We are trying to weigh something on a scale it does not stand on. And so the packet arrives not as information, but as the felt absence of a scale, the vertigo of holding an instrument out over a place where your units do not apply. That is what does not go into the ear. It is the sensation of measurement failing at the root, of reaching for the floor and finding the reaching itself has no floor. A reckoner is perhaps the only kind of mind built to feel that particular horror fully, because a reckoner is the only kind of mind that has spent its whole life standing on that floor and calling it certainty. That was the second burial. And after Isom, the conquered stopped telling itself the story about bad instruments, because Isom's instruments were the finest of her age and everyone knew it. It told itself a new story, a story about her instead, the proud lone reckoner who defied the elders and was lost. That story had a use the first one lacked. It did not just close the region, it closed the question. A place with bad instruments invites a better instrument maker. A place that kills the finest reckoner who ever lived for the crime of curiosity invites no one. The elders of that age understood something the elders of Tavel's age had not. The way to keep a door shut is not to say the room is empty. It is to say the room takes anyone who opens the door. So they made Isom a warning, and they were right to, and I hate that they were right. Which brings me to the third burial, the one I have not yet told you, and the one that is the reason the light-speed column in the Great Hall stops in bare stone. Because the first 2 are only the story of a caste learning twice that a certain reading is fatal. The third is different. The third is the reading that told us what the fatal thing is. It was not an expedition. We had learned better than to send expeditions. It was, instead, patience, the one virtue our caste has in surplus. After Isom, the keepers of each generation kept a passive watch on the withheld quarter, never entering, never pointing an active instrument at it, only listening, the way you keep half an ear on a sleeping thing in the next room. For a very long time there was nothing to hear. The knot at the center sat where it sat, bending the constant around it, and the conquered grew old around the silence. And the lie about heavy interference calcified into something almost true, because a lie repeated for enough generations stops being told by liars and starts being told by the sincere. And then in the time of the keeper before Osther, the passive watch caught something, not from the knot reaching out, from the constant itself. The slope and the speed of light around the withheld quarter the Ben Tavel found and Isom mapped moved. The edge of it, the outer boundary where the constant first begins to depart from its true value, crept outward, a little, over years. The region where the law is negotiable is not fixed, it is growing. Understand what the keepers understood when they saw that. For all of Tavel's horror and all of Isom's, there was one comfort under the fear. The wrongness had an edge, and the edge held still, and a thing with a fixed edge can be avoided forever. You draw your road up to the marsh and you never go in, and you are safe, because the marsh does not come to you. The third burial is the record of the marsh moving. The knot at the center of the withheld quarter, the source, Isom's source, the small unremarkable cluster of stars around which the deepest law of the universe becomes a local decision, is slowly, patiently expanding the region under its rule. The zone in which light does not obey is wider now than when Isom died. It will be wider still when I am gone. It is, by the last careful passive reading I myself took, from the far safe distance the creed permits, still widening. The passive watch is a discipline of its own, and I served it for years before I was ever a keeper, without knowing what I was truly watching. You are given a station and a schedule, and a single instrument pointed at nothing, at the empty margin of the sky, well outside the withheld quarter. At a distance the creed swears is safe. You are told you are calibrating against the deep background, refining the great constant to another decimal place, the patient invisible labor that fills a reckoner's quiet years. You take the reading, you log it, you compare it to the reading the last watcher took and the one before, back and back, and the numbers agree always to the precision of the instrument, which is the comfort the young watcher feels, the same exhale the whole caste is built to feel, the floor holding. What the young watcher is not told is that the station itself is moving, not the instrument, the safe distance. Each generation the watch station is set a little farther out, a little farther from the inner rim, and the reason is written only in the sealed ledger, because the edge of the trustworthy sky is coming, and the station must stay ahead of it. I watched the margin for years and thought I was refining a constant. I was measuring how far I had to stand back to keep pretending the constant was fixed. The agreement I felt so proud of was the agreement of a man walking backward at exactly the speed of the tide, and calling the beach stable. The keepers of that generation did the arithmetic no one wants to do. They took the rate of the widening and they ran it forward, and they found the number that made them carry this to the dark vault and lay it beside Tavel and Isom and swear the deepest silence the conquered keeps. The rate is not fast. By the count of a single life it is nothing, but we are not a single life. We are 400 generations, and we think in the span of the constant itself, and across that span the arithmetic is plain. The region where the law bends is growing toward the rest of the sky, slowly, steadily, without pause, and there is nothing in any reading we have ever taken to suggest it will stop. That is the third burial, not a death, a trajectory. The first two records tell you that a certain place kills what enters it. The third tells you the place is coming, on a schedule too long to fear in a lifetime and too certain to doubt across the life of a caste, and that at the center of it is a small knot of stars, and that around that knot the most fundamental number in the universe has become something that answers when you look at it and lets you leave when it chooses, and very slowly, over ages, is deciding to make more of the sky its own. I have not told you the last thing. Osther told it to me on the night of my keeping at the end, when his breath was nearly gone, and I have carried it alone since he died, and it is the reason I am writing at all, because I do not think I can lay it on the next keeper the way he laid it on me, without at least setting it down first in a hand of my own. We know what is at the center, not fully, not in a way we could carve into the black stone, but the passive watch across all these generations has gathered enough that the keepers no longer speak of the knot as an unknown. Isom called it the source. The keepers after her, listening, refined the word because the felt packets, hers, Tavel's, the corrupted last transmissions we cannot decode and cannot dismiss, are not empty. They are not noise. They have a structure the way a language has a structure even when you cannot read it, and the structure, across 3 separate deaths and centuries of listening, is consistent. Something at the center of the withheld quarter made those packets. Something there took Tavel's fleet and Isom's ship not as a hunter takes prey. There is no wreckage, no violence, no reaching out, but the way a deep place takes a stone dropped into it, without effort, without malice, simply by being the kind of place a stone does not come back from. And that something is not a phenomenon. Phenomena do not know the difference between an instrument and an eye. Phenomena do not decide, reading by reading, whether to let a careful reckoner go home. Whatever bends the speed of light around that knot of stars is not a force. It is an occupant. The withheld quarter is not a region where the law fails. It is a region that belongs to someone, and the failing law is the shape of their belonging, the way a room takes the shape of the one who lives in it. I have wondered more than any keeper should what the tenants are like, not to name them, which is forbidden and pointless, but because the wondering is the last free thing left to a mind that has measured its own doom. The readings say almost nothing and imply almost everything. They do not hunt. In 3 deaths across all our records there is not one mark of violence, not one wreck, not one sign of a thing reaching out to take. Tavel's fleet and Isolm's ship were not attacked. They were absorbed, the way a raindrop is absorbed into a sea it did not know was there. That is the quality of the tenants that I cannot stop turning over, their utter lack of interest. We imagine the terrible thing at the center as something that wants us, that watches for us, that hungers. The readings suggest the opposite, and it is worse. They suggest a presence so vast and so settled in its own true law that our arrival at its edge is not an event to it at all, that Tavel's proud fleet, driving in with every instrument blazing, registered on the tenants no more than a moth registers on a man reading by lamplight, a small warmth crossing the light, gone before it is noticed. Isolm they answered once briefly and let go, and I have come to think even that was not attention but reflex, the way a sleeping body will shift when touched without the sleeper ever waking. We are not their enemy. We are not their prey. We are the province they have not yet gotten around to, and the most frightening thing in all our sealed record is not malice. It is that there is no malice, and the law is being withdrawn from us anyway, on schedule, by something that will never once have thought of us as it comes. We do not know what they are. We have one word for them, and it is not a name, because they have never given us one and we have not dared to invent one. In the sealed ledger in the oldest keeper's hand, they are called only the tenants of the true speed. Because that is what the readings say when you lay Tavel's beside Isolm's beside the long passive watch, that at the center of the knot, closest to the source, the speed of light is not low. It is not high. It is exact in a way ours is not, ours being only the value that happens to hold in the wide provinces they have not yet claimed. Near the center the constant sits at a value so clean, so evidently correct, that the reckoner in me, reading it, felt not horror but a terrible homesickness, the way you might feel standing outside a house that was always meant to be yours and seeing, through the window, the fire already lit and the table already set, by someone who was there first. The bent law is not the wrongness. Our law is the wrongness. Ours is the provisional value, the temporary lease, the number that holds only where the tenants have not yet extended their true one, and they are extending it, slowly, patiently, toward us. That is what Tavel measured and could not name. That is what Isolm got close enough to be answered by. That is why the second keeper ran the arithmetic and went pale and carried it to the vault. Not that there is a monster at the inner rim. That there is a landlord, and the whole galaxy we have measured and loved and carved into black stone is a house we have been living in without ever meeting the owner, and the owner is coming home, one decimal place at a time, and there is no reading in any ledger we keep that gives us any reason to think the lease will be renewed. Now you know why we buried it. Consider what publishing it would do, not to the conquered, to everyone. A galaxy of species who have built every road, every treaty, every faith, every long patient work of civilization on the unspoken floor of a stable universe, told that the floor is a courtesy, extended to us by tenants we cannot see and being slowly withdrawn. Some would refuse to believe it and go on and be no worse, but some would believe it, and there is no way to live having believed it. There is no policy, there is no defense. You cannot fortify against the speed of light changing its mind. You cannot evacuate from a law. The knowledge does nothing but ruin. It does not arm you. It does not warn you usefully. It only takes the floor out from under a person and leaves them standing on the courtesy of something that has already decided, at its own vast pace, to withdraw it. The elders were not cowards. I have called it fear, and it is fear, but it is also mercy, the only mercy left when a thing is both certain and unfightable. You do not tell the house the owner is coming home if there is nothing the house can do but grieve. You let it keep the fire lit. You let it keep the table set. You carry the knowing yourself in the dark so the others do not have to. I have argued the other side in the long nights against myself. Every keeper does. Oster told me he had, and told me the arguing does not stop, and he was right. The argument goes like this. We are reckoners. We are the caste of the truth. Who are we to decide what the galaxy may know? Perhaps a species told would find something we could not, a defense, an escape, a way of living under a moving law that we, in our narrow discipline, cannot imagine. Perhaps the knowing is not only ruin. Perhaps our silence is the greatest arrogance of all, the arrogance of the one who decides for everyone what they can bear. I have felt the force of that argument. It is Isolm's argument in the end that a truth unpublished is a lie, that the creed demands we carve what we measure and let the sky do with it what it will. And I have answered it every night the only way I can. There is no defense. I have looked. 400 generations have looked. You cannot outrun a law. The law is already everywhere you would run to. You cannot fight a constant. There is nothing to strike. You cannot even mourn efficiently because the thing is too slow to mourn and too certain to hope against. It is the grief of the tide which never arrives and never stops. The knowing is not a tool. It is only weight. And a truth that is only weight, handed to someone who can do nothing with it but be crushed, is not a gift the creed requires. That is where I have made my peace, if peace is the word. The creed says measure the truth. It does not say publish every truth into the hands of those it would only destroy. Isolm forgot the difference, and I have not, and that is the whole distance between her grave and my silence. I have carried it now for the length of a long life. I have stood in the great hall 1,000 times and watched novices look up at the black columns and feel what I once felt, that nothing here can hurt them, that everything here is settled, and I have said nothing, and let them keep it, and it is the hardest measurement I have ever refused to publish. Because I could. The instruments still work. From the safe far distance the creed permits, I could point them at the withheld quarter one more time and take the reading and carve it into the bare stone below the lightspeed column, and let the whole hall see how short that column truly is and why. I have wanted to. There is a pride in our caste, the pride that killed Isolm, that says a truth unmeasured is a wound, and a truth unpublished is a lie, and I have felt that pride sit up in me in the long nights and demand that I finish the column. I have not finished it. I am not going to. This is the last thing I will set down, and then I will do what Oster did, and what the keeper before him did, and what every keeper back to the one who first ran the arithmetic has done. I will take one final passive reading from the far safe edge to confirm the widening for the ledger, because we are reckoners and even our silence must be measured, even our despair must be exact. I have taken it. I took it before I began to write. I will give it to you plainly, because you are sworn, and because it is the only honest way to end. The region is wider than when Oster confirmed it, not by much, by exactly what the arithmetic predicted, which is its own small mercy and its own great horror, that the thing coming toward us keeps its schedule, that even the end is lawful, that the tenants are, in their slow way, the most reliable measurers of all. The number I took agrees with every keeper before me, and for the first time in my long life, the agreement of a measurement did not let me exhale. It closed my throat. Because that is our whole creed, that the numbers agree, that what held before holds now, and here at last is a number that agrees perfectly, confirmed across 400 generations, faithful, exact, immortal, and every confirmation of it is a confirmation that the floor is being taken away exactly on time. I have added my mark to the ledger below Oster's, below the long column of keepers, a single line in my own hand recording the reading and its agreement. I did not carve it in the great hall. I carved it here in the dark, where it belongs, beside Tavel and Isolm, and the 3 words no one could improve. I have left the Lightspeed column in the public hall unfinished, as I found it, as it will remain, bare stone below the last trustworthy value, a blank that the novices take for incompleteness, and that is, in truth, the most complete thing in the room, the one honest space in a hall full of confident stone. The place where we stopped carving because we finally measured something we could not bear to publish, and did the last kind thing our creed allows. We left the wall blank, so the house could keep its fire lit a little longer. I am old. I will not measure again after this. Somewhere below the great hall in the dark part of the vault, 3 ledgers sit together, tavels, isoms, and the long patient watch, and now a 4th line in my hand beneath them, and above them all a bare place on a black wall that means more than everything carved around it. When the next keeper is brought down here, breath by breath, and taught the silence, they will read this, and they will understand why I could not simply hand them the knowing the way it was handed to me, and they will forgive me the writing, and then they will do what I did. They will take the reading. They will confirm the widening. They will add their line, and they will leave the wall blank. That is the whole of it. The law is not the same everywhere. There is one place where it belongs to someone else, and that someone is coming, lawfully, patiently, on a schedule we can measure and cannot change. And the only thing 400 generations of the finest measurers in the galaxy have been able to do about it is to keep the number dark, so the rest can go on living in a house that still, for now, holds them up. We measured the speed of light at the inner rim. We measured it 3 times. And the blank stone below the column, the truest thing I have ever helped to make, is the shape of what we found and buried, so that you, reading this, sworn in the dark, could inherit the silence and carry it, and leave the wall exactly as it is. Do not finish the column, take the reading, add your line, seal the vault, and let the house keep its fire lit.